Twilight air hung heavy over Evergreen, tinged with a softness that belied the tension thrumming in George Elms's chest. Inside the modest Elms household, George found himself pacing the living room, eyes darting anxiously between the clock and the door. Each tick echoed through the silence, amplifying his unease as shadows lengthened across the floor. "Where is she?" he murmured, glancing at the half-empty coffee mug on the table, remnants of a ritual he'd looked forward to so many times. The anticipation of their shared dinner had morphed into a gnawing worry. Those fleeting moments of laughter that once filled the room seemed like a distant dream now. The silence felt like a weight he couldn't lift. When the clock struck 7, dread coiled tightly around his heart. The thought of sitting down alone became unbearable. Panic began to creep in, a familiar yet unwelcome companion. "Norma!" he called, a tremor in his voice that revealed his growing fear. The stillness that answered was deafening, the air thick with unspoken words waiting to be released. With determination surging through his veins, George threw open the front door and stepped into the cool evening air. The street was quiet, the rustle of the leaves whispering secrets he couldn't decipher. He made his way toward the highway, each step feeling heavy with the weight of impending dread. The memory of Norma's laughter echoed in his thoughts, lacing his heart with a mix of longing and anxiety. The distant hum of vehicles approached, momentarily dispelling his solitude. He thought about the life they had built, the shared dreams and late-night talks that had once brought them closer together, but lately those bonds had been overshadowed by silence and missed connections. Shadows danced across the pavement under the fading light as the growing uncertainty tightened its grip around him. Standing at the edge of the highway, George squared his shoulders, searching the darkening horizon. What if something had happened? What if she was hurt or lost? The questions tumbled through his mind like falling leaves, creating an unsettling storm of fear and anxiety. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the creeping sense of despair. Where could she be? The thought stirred something deep within him, a long-buried understanding of the fragility of their love. The world seemed to close in as George grappled with the enormity of the unknown, standing at the precipice of hope and fear. Each moment stretched into infinity, and as headlights began to appear in the distance, George's heart raced. Could he still reach out to her, to bridge the chasm that had widened between them? With determination strengthened by love, he stepped into the uncertainty of the night. Whatever it took, he would find her. In the dim light, he steadied himself against the heavy weight of longing and fear. Somewhere within the night lay the promise of a reconciliation, a chance to discover the love he hadn't fully expressed. George drew in a breath, feeling the flicker of hope ignite within. It was time to confront not just the darkness outside, but the shadows within. The sun began to rise, casting a gentle glow over Evergreen as George sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched plate before him. The soft warmth of morning light seeped through the curtains, illuminating the small kitchen he had shared with Norma for years. Each morning held the promise of their routines, yet now they felt like remnants of a bygone era. A deep-seated ache settled within him as memories washed over him like waves, each one tinged with laughter and love. Flashback. It was a sunny afternoon, and George and Norma strolled hand in hand through the town square, their laughter blending harmoniously with the sounds of the bustling market. He could still hear her teasing him about his terrible choice of fruits as they passed the vendor's stand. "I swear, George, you pick the weirdest combinations. Apples and jalapenos, really." She'd laughed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Hey, you can't blame me for thinking outside the box," he replied, tugging her closer. The way she beamed at him, seemingly captivated by his every word, filled him with a sense of pride. That afternoon, they had walked aimlessly, sharing dreams and bantering about their future. But as vivid as those memories were, they contrasted starkly with the silence that now enveloped their home. George's thoughts turned melancholy, reflecting on the cracks that had formed in their relationship. He recalled the moments when they had drifted apart, the long nights spent in separate rooms, buried in their own silences. Between the demands of work and the weight of unfulfilled expectations, their connection frayed, leaving them in a state of quiet desperation. Flashback. One night after a long day, George sat in their living room, his eyes glued to the television. "George," Norma's voice cut through the static gloom. "Can we talk?" He'd looked up, annoyance creeping in. "About what?" "I'm tired, Norma." But he could see her hesitation, a painful shadow passing over her features. "It's just, I feel like we're drifting. I miss the way we used to talk." He had waved her off. "We talk all the time. You're being dramatic." She had sighed, looking down at her hands. "It's not drama, George. It's real. I need you. I need to know that I matter. Not just as your wife, but as me, as Norma." The memory stung, the realization of how distant he'd become hitting him like a cold wave. He'd brushed her worries aside, believing that routines provided the security both of them craved. But now, staring at the unfinished breakfast, he was left questioning all the missed opportunities to connect, the silence that had grown between them like an unscalable wall. George's gaze fell to a photograph on the wall, capturing a moment of happiness frozen in time. It showed them at a county fair, arms wrapped around each other, faces glowing with delight. That day marked a milestone, the moment they chose to commit to each other. Staring at it now, however, the image felt like an echo of a happier time, a constant reminder of what they had lost. Suddenly the phone rang, snapping George from his reverie. He picked it up, hoping for news about Norma. Instead, it was Clara Hall, his neighbor and old friend. "George, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you," she said, her voice concerned. "Not really, Clara. I can't find Norma." The silence on the other end felt heavy, a palpable weight. "I'm coming over. We'll figure this out together. I don't want to bother you. I feel like I should be doing more," he muttered, taking the guilt upon himself. "Stop it, George. Let me help you." "You're not alone in this," Clara reassured him, her steadfastness offering a glimmer of hope amid his turmoil. When Clara arrived, she exuded a warmth that filled the room, breaking the chain of despair. "Tell me everything," she urged, taking a seat across from him. As he recounted the events of the past hours, the frantic searching, sleepless nights, and growing unease, Clara listened, her empathy drawing him out. "George, listen. Sometimes we need to create space for vulnerability in relationships. You don't have to wear a mask of strength all the time." Her voice was steady, nurturing him with the understanding that felt foreign but refreshing. "What if it's too late? What if I've already lost her because I couldn't be the husband she needed?" His voice wavered, vulnerability sneaking into the cracks he had carefully maintained. "This isn't about blame. It's about growth. You love her, and there's always a chance to rebuild. Sometimes in silence we lose sight of the other's needs. Reach out, George. Find the words." Clara's encouragement ignited a flicker of determination within him. As the sun drifted high in the sky, George felt an unfamiliar sense of clarity. He couldn't change the past, but he could still fight for their future. Although doubt lingered, he understood that the love he held for Norma was worth every ounce of vulnerability. "I'll try," he replied quietly, determination brushing against his heart. "I'll find her." With Clara's support, the day's burdens felt lighter. George recognized that he was not entirely alone, and for the first time in some time, hope surged beneath his guilt. But he also realized that confronting the deeper issues required more than he had previously acknowledged. There was a journey ahead, a search not just for Norma, but for understanding and healing. As he looked out the window into the bright world beyond, he knew he needed to uncover the roots of his love, even the painful truths that lay hidden. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the lake in shades of deep blue and gold. Sitting alone in his truck parked by the water's edge, George held his phone tightly between his hands, the glow of the screen illuminating his anxious face. Memories of happier times flooded back. Soft laughter, warm embraces, late-night conversations that once felt eternal. But now, silence shrouded his world, thick with isolation. The radio played softly, a familiar country tune that echoed the ache in his heart. The lyrics spoke of lost love and longing, distinctly reminiscent of his relationship with Norma. George leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes as he was transported to a time when joy filled the air like music. Flashback. On a balmy evening, George and Norma danced together beneath a canopy of stars. "You've got two left feet," she laughed, twirling him around, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I'll prove you wrong," he said, pulling her close. Their laughter mingled with the sounds of crickets, creating a harmony that wrapped around them like a warm blanket. He could still feel her presence, her smile, her light. In those moments, love felt limitless. End flashback. The memory pulled at his heart, stirring both nostalgia and despair. The vibrant moments felt like ghosts, haunting him with reminders of the disconnect that had formed between them. One moment, they were two souls entwined in laughter. The next, they stood worlds apart, caught in a silence that suffocated rather than healed. Suddenly the phone buzzed, jolting George from his reverie. Clara's name appeared, and he answered quickly, tension knotting in his stomach. "Hey, Clara. Hey, I wanted to check in. Have you thought any more about talking to Norma?" Her voice radiated sincerity. "I'm trying," he said, staring out at the still water. "But this loneliness is suffocating. I feel like I'm losing part of myself. I get it, but you can't navigate this alone. Reach out to her. It's scary, but you owe it to both of you to try," Clara urged, her voice steady and reassuring. "What if it's too late? What if I've pushed her away beyond repair?" he asked, stricken with doubt. "It's never too late unless you let it be," she replied. "You need to take that leap. You love her." After hanging up, George sat in silence, contemplating Clara's words. The stars twinkled like memories, bright but distant. He recognized that the longer he avoided reaching out, the more darkness would envelop him, trapping him in an endless cycle of regret. Taking a deep breath, he picked up his phone again, scrolling to Norma's contact, his heart racing. He hesitated, fear flooding his mind. Just as doubt threatened to claim him again, he pushed through, typing, "I miss you, Norma. Can we talk? I want to make things right." It was a small step, yet it felt monumental. As George hit send, he felt both exhilarated and terrified, staring at the screen like it held the answers to his questions. He understood this wasn't simply about reaching out, it was about confronting the deep-rooted issues that had haunted their relationship. Each passing second felt like an eternity. With the phone still in his hand, he reflected on the weight of his silence. He'd let pride overshadow truth, and now, facing the unknown, he realized that vulnerability was the only way forward. He allowed himself to hope. Whatever happened next, he was prepared to confront the pain and lay bare his heart. The loneliness couldn't define him any longer. He desired connection, needed it with Norma, even in its rawest form. As the night deepened, George finally exhaled, releasing the tension that had built within him. He wasn't just waiting. He was ready to embrace what lay ahead, to rediscover love even in vulnerability. The water shimmered under the moonlight, a reminder of hope glimmering on the surface of their lives. "It's time to fight for what mattered," he thought. With renewed determination, George rolled down the window, letting the crisp night air wash over him. The journey had only begun, but he was poised to take it, no longer afraid of the shadows that lay ahead. Morning light crept through the thin curtains of George's bedroom, casting soft patterns on the walls. He blinked awake, the familiar comforts of home igniting a sense of nostalgia. Yet, for the first time in a long while, there was an undercurrent of anticipation coursing through him. He glanced at the clock. It was already late. With a jolt, he rushed to the kitchen, his heart pounding as he noted the absence of any messages from Norma. Doubt washed over him. What if I scared her away, he thought, but he reminded himself of Clara's urging words. It's never too late unless you let it be. He took a moment to gather his resolve, stepping outside onto the porch. The warm Texas sun brushed against his skin, still laced with the crispness of the morning air. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply the scent of blooming wildflowers, an uplifting reminder of renewal. George walked to the small wooden swing on the porch, where he often sat to compose his songs. The canvas of the horizon shifted as the sun climbed higher, a brilliant palette of oranges and pinks, reflecting the flutter of hope in his heart. It was a visceral reminder of how life could both begin and end in cycles, much like love. He settled into the swing, guitar in hand, feeling its familiar weight against his body. As he strummed the strings, music began to flow freely, notes escaping like whispers into the morning air. Memories of Norma flickered through his mind, her laugh mingling with the chords. The feelings he had tucked away now surged forth, spilling out into a song full of vulnerability and ache, but also hope. Flashback. In their living room, sunlight streamed through the window as George played the guitar, and Norma danced around him joyfully. "You'll write me a love song one day, right?" she teased playfully. "Absolutely, just wait for it," he had grinned, feeling the infusion of love and laughter in the room. End flashback. As the song took shape, tears welled in his eyes. It was raw, unfiltered emotion, a reflection of the love they had nurtured and the pain they had endured. This wasn't just about missing her. It was a testament to the depths of his feelings. To channel that truth into music felt cathartic, as though each strum pulled out the old hurts, clearing the path for what could be. The reverie broke as George heard footsteps on the gravel path. He looked up, startled, and saw Clara approaching, her buoyant energy lighting up the morning. "Thought I'd find you here," she said with a smile. "How's it going?" "I've been writing," he replied, wiping away traces of emotion. "It's a lot harder than I thought." "Writing can be like therapy," Clara said, leaning against the porch railing. "You're getting closer to what matters." "I hope so," George murmured, glancing back at his guitar. "I just wish I knew how to reach her." "Every song has a story. Let your heart speak and you'll find your way," she encouraged with sincerity. "Just remember, it's okay to be vulnerable. That's where real connection starts." In that moment, George felt the truth in her words resonate within him. The fear began to unravel, realizing that vulnerability was not a weakness. It was the essence of authenticity. He needed to be open, not only to Norma, but to his own heart. Later that evening, after a day spent attempting to craft a song that mirrored his heart, George received a text notification. Norma's name lit up on the screen. His heart raced at the sight. "I got your message. Can we meet?" He'd been expecting this moment, a mix of dread and excitement swirling within him. George quickly typed back, the anticipation mixing with nerves. "Yes, please, wherever you want." The evening wore on slowly. Finally, they agreed to meet at their favorite cafe, a quaint little place with wicker chairs and ivy-covered walls, where laughter once mingled with love. The memories flooded back, but now, rather than becoming a weight, they ignited George's determination to mend what had been broken. As he approached the cafe, a deep breath grounded him. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and pastries. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the familiar room until they landed on Norma. Sitting alone at a table, her eyes clouded with both hope and apprehension. "Hey," he said softly, approaching her with a mixture of nerves and yearning. "Hey," she responded, her voice equally tentative. The weight of unsaid words hung in the air, and for a moment, George wasn't sure how to bridge the distance that had grown between them. They stared at each other, emotions simmering like a pot left on the stove. It was a moment pregnant with possibility. Slowly, he pulled out the chair opposite her, taking a seat. A comforting silence enveloped them as they gathered their thoughts. Finally, George spoke, choosing his words carefully. "I'm sorry for everything, Norma. For not being there when you needed me, for letting silence grow between us. I've been so caught up in my own fears. I see that now." Norma's gaze softened, her defenses lowering. "I felt so alone, George, like you hadn't noticed I was losing myself." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been scared too, scared that we weren't the same people anymore. But I want to fight for us. I miss you, everything about you. I want to share the silence, celebrate the moments, and build a life together again." Tears sparkled in her eyes as she listened intently, acknowledging the sincerity in his tone. "I miss you too. It hurt so many times and I thought it was over." "It doesn't have to be," he interrupted gently. "I've been writing songs lately, about us, about love and loss, but also about hope." He looked deeply into her eyes, an open invitation for her to dive in. "There's so much left for us to explore if you're open to it." A faint smile broke through her uncertainty as she nodded. "I'm willing to try, to be vulnerable together." Their connection reignited, the blooms of hope thickening their conversation like threads weaving through the fabric of their lives. George felt the edges of his fears dissolve as they spoke, laughter soon punctuating their words. The energy shifted, dissolving the heaviness of the past in the warmth of their rekindled bond. As they left the cafe and stepped into the evening air, George and Norma walked side by side, hand in hand, no longer afraid of the shadows but embracing the journey ahead. The night wrapped around them, the stars shining brightly overhead, a new beginning unfolding under the vastness of the universe, a reminder that love was not just a feeling, but a choice, one they were both ready to make. Days passed since their heartfelt conversation at the cafe, and George felt as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Each day brought new moments of connection with Norma. They shared meals, went on long drives, and spent evenings wrapped in conversation that flowed with the ease of old friends. Yet beneath this warmth an undercurrent of tension remained, the shadows of the past lingering like faint scars on their hearts. One evening, George returned home after a long day on the road. He had been working on a set list for an upcoming concert, the melodies and lyrics spinning in his head like the wind outside. But as he pushed open the door, he was greeted by silence. Norma wasn't home, and an unsettling sense of loneliness crept back in. He moved through the house, the familiar spaces feeling achingly empty. The dinner table lay untouched, and an unmade bed whispered of unfulfilled moments. George thought of the warmth they had shared, and the conversations that still echoed in his mind but felt a pang of fear. Determined to stay hopeful, he grabbed his guitar and took a seat on the porch, strumming soft chords that melded into the quiet of the evening. As the stars emerged, he lost himself in the music when a text notification broke his solitude. It was Norma, and his heart quickened. "Can we talk? Something's been weighing on me." A knot of anxiety formed in his stomach. What could it be? He texted back quickly. "Of course I'm home." Minutes felt like hours, and just when he convinced himself to breathe again, the front door swung open. Norma stepped inside, a storm of emotions dancing across her face. "Hey," she managed, her voice strained. "Hey," George replied, noting the furrowed brow and the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "What's going on?" "I've been thinking a lot. About us. About everything." She crossed her arms, stepping awkwardly closer to him on the porch. George put his guitar down, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "Okay, I'm here. What's on your mind? I thought we were moving forward, but I can't shake off the past. The silence between us, the distance we created. It still hurts, George." Her voice trembled slightly, vulnerability exposed in the midnight air. "I know, but we can't stay stuck there. I want to move forward with you, together," he said earnestly, reaching for her hand, searching for connection. Norma hesitated, pulling back slightly. "But what if we're just pushing the pain away? What if it resurfaces?" She looked into his eyes, earnest in her expression. "I'm afraid we'll end up right back where we started, and I can't take that heartbreak again." George's heart sank as he realized the depth of her fears. He felt the urge to reassure her, to engulf her in unwavering love, but words faltered. "I know it's scary, but we have to face the past to move on. We can't ignore it." "I don't want to ignore it, but I don't want to drown in it either," Norma replied, her eyes wide with emotion. "What if I'm not strong enough to let go of all the pain?" With her words, the shadows of doubt returned to George. He felt the ground shift beneath him. The very thing they had been trying to build seemed fragile and precarious. "We're strong enough together, and I want to help you. I want to listen." "No," she said, a sense of urgency rising in her voice. "I don't think I can be what you need right now. It's not that I don't want us, but I need to figure this out on my own. I don't want to drag you down with me." George's heart sank as he tried to process her words. He shook his head, searching for hope in the despair. "You're not dragging me down. You're my partner. I want to share your burdens, to help carry this weight together." The desperation in his voice mirrored the emotional turmoil twisting within him. Norma stepped back, turning away to gaze at the night sky. "I don't know if this is healthy for either of us. I don't want to hurt you again, George." With her words, frustration surged within him. "But you don't need to push me away. I'm willing to fight for us." Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated by the distant croaking of frogs and the rustling leaves. George's heart thumped beneath the weight of her resistance. "What are we doing here? I thought we were trying to rebuild. If we're going to let fear dictate our path, then we might as well give in to the past that hurt us." "You don't understand." Norma's voice rose, cracking with tension. "It's not just about fear. It's about self-preservation. I thought I could be okay, but I'm still fighting my own demons. You shouldn't have to bear that burden. Nor should you have to bear it alone," George pleaded, stepping closer. But as he gazed into her eyes, he saw something bittersweet, a flicker of love tangled with doubt and despair. Norma's expression hardened, a wall forming around her heart. "Maybe we need some space to sort this out." The words pierced through him, felt like a chill creeping into his very core. "Space? Are you sure that's what we need?" His voice trembled with confusion. "We both need to think, George. This is too hard right now." She shifted away from him, her shoulders sagging under an emotional weight he could only guess at, nearly breaking his spirit. He opened his mouth, hoping to salvage the moment, but the lump in his throat suffocated him. Is this goodbye?" Norma looked away. Tears glistened in her eyes as she shook her head slowly. "No, but it has to be for now. I hope you understand." She stepped back toward the door, and with each step, George felt as if his heart was being drawn into an abyss. Desperation clawed at him, and he grasped for something, anything to hold on to. "Norma, please don't walk away." But the door clicked shut, and he was left standing alone on the porch, solitude swallowing him whole once more. Each heartbeat echoed in the silence of the night, a reminder of the love slipping through his fingers. He sank down onto the porch swing, the weight of failure heavy on his chest. Anguish wrapped around him like a shroud, but beneath it all lay the fragmented pieces of hope. Hadn't he just fought so hard to rekindle their connection? The music that had guided him through the evening felt distant now, each note a haunting reminder of what had been. George closed his eyes, overwhelmed, recognizing that this journey wasn't merely about overcoming the shadows, it was also about confronting the vulnerability that made them human. Eventually he reached for his guitar again, fingers trembling as he strummed the strings. Out poured the anguish, the fears, the doubts, the old scars. It manifested in lyrics that echoed his solitude and the love he couldn't shake. He played late into the night, finding solace in creativity, but the deeper he delved, the more profound his sense of loss grew. The song was his heart laid bare, a poignant testament to their struggle, capturing the bittersweet memory of love's persistence, even amid the looming uncertainty. There was still a flicker of hope resting amid the sorrow, and he played on, determined to capture the essence of both the pain and the beauty woven within their love. In this moment of vulnerability, George accepted that the journey wasn't over. It was simply beginning a new chapter, one that would require the strength to face the shadows, not just flee from them. Morning light filtered through the trees, creating a mosaic of shifting shadows on the porch where George had spent the night lost in thought. A serenity lay over the landscape, but in his heart, a storm still raged. After Norma had left, he had poured out his soul into music, crafting a bittersweet ballad, but now he faced the harsh truth of their separation. As he sat on the porch, strumming absent-mindedly, he reflected on those moments they had shared and the silence that had grown in its place. Each note seemed to linger in the air, carrying reminders of joy and grief. He wanted the world to know their story, but he knew he first had to find his own peace. Days rolled into weeks. The distance between George and Norma felt insurmountable, even as they exchanged occasional texts to check in on each other. Each ping of his phone became a bittersweet reminder of the warmth that had once filled their days. "How are you?" she would ask, and he would respond with carefully crafted phrases, full of unspoken longing. But George realized that he could no longer operate in a silence that confined him. He understood the depth of his vulnerability, realizing that this was a chance, not just to reconnect with Norma, but also to discover himself. One evening, as dusk folded itself into night, George pulled out his old notebook filled with songs and ideas, fragments of himself that had been hidden for too long. He opened the notebook and began to write again, letting his emotions flow freely onto the page. "Every hue of love," he penned, "can fade to grey, but it yearns to shine through the darkness." Inspired, George walked over to his guitar, fingers trembling less as each day passed. He played the tune that had been haunting him, a canvas for his thoughts. It was a melody filled with echoes of laughter, of pain, and of hope wanting to take flight. In the middle of his creative storm, George found clarity. He knew that the music he was crafting wasn't just for himself. It was also for Norma. It was his admission of how much he valued their bond. He wanted her to listen, not simply to the notes, but to the raw emotion behind them, the promise of how deeply he cared for her. As night fell, George put on a show at the local community center. It was small but intimate, the kind of gathering where families, friends, and old neighbors came to share stories and memories. George stood in front of a humble crowd, feeling both nerves and excitement surge within him. The stage felt incredibly alive, and when he brought the microphone closer, he could feel Norma's presence close by, even if she wasn't physically there. He took a deep breath, introduced his set, and began to play. The first notes echoed softly, and the crowd settled into a comforting silence. Each chord resonated within him, and he shared pieces of his heart along with melodies, turning vulnerability into strength. When he began to play the new song, the room seemed to hold its breath. The lyrics spilled out like a confessional diary. "In shadows we wandered, lost in our fears, but through darkness I've found, love's flame still appears. In silence we faltered, yet still I believe, with the light of our past, together we weave." As he sang, he felt the weight of his pain drift away, replaced by a lingering hope. He watched as faces in the crowd began to resonate with his words, some nodding along as the collective emotion grew. People leaned forward, their own stories reflected in his raw honesty. When he finished, the room was still, as if time had paused, waiting for the impact of the moment to settle. Then, gently, applause began to ripple through the crowd, growing into a thunderous crescendo. For George, the sound was a balm, no longer just echoes of solitude and despair. He stepped down from the stage, heart racing, when he felt a familiar gentle tap on his shoulder. Turning around, he was met with the warm, tear-streaked face of Norma. It was a surprise he had dared not hope for, and yet it filled him with joy and trepidation. "George, that was beautiful," she said, her voice a quiet spark in the air. George struggled to find words, overwhelmed by seeing her again, by the unspoken emotions swirling between them. "Thank you," he managed, feeling the warmth of her presence ignite something inside him. "I worried you wouldn't come. I almost didn't. But I heard you practicing and I had to see you," she confessed, her vulnerability radiating openly, striking a chord in his heart. George swallowed his nerves, emboldened by the moment. "That song, it's about us. I didn't want to hide from the past anymore," he admitted. "I wanted to fight for us." Norma's brow furrowed slightly as if weighing his words. "I'm scared, George. I don't want to hurt anymore. I don't want to get my hopes up." Stepping closer, George reached out, taking her hands in his. "I understand, but I've realized that life is too short to live in fear of what could go wrong. The shadows teach us, but we can't dwell there. We have to embrace what's next." Tears pooled in Norma's eyes as she squeezed his hands tightly. "You make it sound so easy. It won't be easy, but together, we can navigate the walls between us. Love doesn't promise perfection. It promises understanding and authenticity." He needed her to see the truth in his heart, plain and unguarded. Norma took a deep breath, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, yet something softened in her expression. "Maybe we can try again, together. But I need to be honest about my struggles." "I want that too," he urged, heartened and hopeful. "We'll take it one step at a time." As they spoke, the atmosphere around them shimmered with anticipation. It felt less like an ending and more like a new beginning. Together, they stood at the precipice of possibility. Two hearts willing to confront their fears, their vulnerabilities, and the love that persisted despite the pain. Hand in hand, they left the community center under a blanket of stars. The challenges ahead wouldn't vanish, but in that moment, George felt a renewed sense of purpose, a promise to embrace not just the sunshine, but also the storms that life would inevitably bring. They were no longer alone. With each other, they could face whatever lay ahead, taking the journey together as they forged their path into the unknown, bound by love, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable. The weeks following their heartfelt conversation unfolded like a fragile flower, each day a new petal revealing warmth and hope. Together, George and Norma embraced the challenges of rebuilding their relationship, nurturing a bond strengthened by honesty and the courage to confront their vulnerabilities. Their days brimmed with small moments of joy, shared coffee on the porch, spontaneous road trips through the sun-drenched fields, and evenings spent wrapped in laughter and deep conversations. As they navigated their emotions, both ancient and new, George saw a glimmer of the connection they once had, one that was transforming into something richer. One afternoon, while wandering through a local art festival, George found himself drawn to a booth filled with intricately painted guitars. Inspiration struck hard as he turned to Norma, enthusiasm lighting up his face. "Let's decorate a guitar together. It can symbolize our journey." Norma's eyes sparkled back. "That sounds wonderful. It can tell our story." They spent hours at the booth, painting hues that represented their shared moments, blues for the shadows they had faced, vibrant yellows for the hope of tomorrow, and greens for the growth they yearned to achieve. With each brushstroke, they wove their history into the instrument, each detail imbued with meaning. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over their creation, George strummed the newly painted guitar, letting the music weave through the sounds of the festival. It felt good to express their newfound connection, a tapestry of their intertwined lives. Encouraged by the guitar's symbolism, George decided to plan a performance at a local venue. Sharing their story through song felt important, transforming old fears into newfound hope. The anticipation built steadily as the date approached. On the night of the performance, George stood backstage, anxiety tightening in his chest like a vice. He glanced to find Norma waiting in the wings, offering him a reassuring nod. He took a deep breath, feeling her presence steady him. He wasn't alone. When he stepped onto the stage, George was met with warm applause. The crowd settled in, eager for the stories hidden within his words. He poured his heart into each strummed chord, singing of love that had endured trials, of the courage found in vulnerability, and the light dawning after the darkest nights. The audience entered his emotional world, swaying to the rhythm of his voice. He saw Norma watching, her face filled with pride. Each note spoke of their journey, their rediscovered love illuminated by the shared experiences that had brought them back together. When the final chord lingered in the air, applause erupted, swirling around him like a warm embrace. George stepped off stage, overwhelmed by a sense of accomplishment and connection. He spotted Norma rushing toward him, her eyes shimmering with joy. "You were incredible," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. The warmth of their embrace felt like a promise fulfilled, a confirmation of their bond's resilience. "Thank you for being here," he whispered, pulling back to look into her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." "We did this together," she replied, her smile radiant. "You've grown so much, I'm proud of us." In that moment, George knew they had emerged from the shadows of their past. They stood at the brink of a new chapter, ready to embrace the future together, unafraid to face the challenges ahead. As they stepped out into the night, stars blanketed the sky above them, each twinkle a reminder of the journey they had traveled and the adventures that lay before them. Together, they would continue painting their story, full of love, understanding, and the courage to let their hearts soar. With each other, they were prepared to embrace life's next song, one filled with possibility, vulnerability, and the unyielding power of love.